Hello, everybody. Good evening and welcome to another Wednesday night Bible study here with me, myself. I am Pastor Strange, for those of you joining us for the first time that maybe don't know me. It's good to see everybody. We do have a few prayer requests. I don't have my phone on me, so let me pull them up so I get all the details right. Of course. I don't know which of these emails is the correct one. Let's hope it was this one. It was not. Okay. Can I get that? Okay, it's being difficult. All right. Hello, Sylvia.
It's not scary enough.
Good evening. Hello, Mom. Good evening. Okay, so I know we're praying for, pull it back up. Liliana had her, how do you say that? Do you say the letters, or she's not in the room, is she? She's not. I'm going to say MEPS and look like an idiot. MEPS testing for the Marine Corps, and then it said had a couple of waivers to get, unfortunately. So I don't think that's the news they were hoping for, but that's the way it goes. So continue to pray for Liliana. She can get that squared away. We're also praying for Kathy 9, who did have her knee replacement surgery. There was an update. Oh, it's in the other one. Okay. So an update on Kathy. The surgery went really good. It was a little better than it was last time, so she said she would go home tomorrow. And thank you, everybody, for their prayers. So good news for her. Continue to pray for her recovery, even after she gets home, because I can only imagine what that is going to entail. So that's all that I have as far as prayer requests and updates. If you guys have something, leave a comment. I'll read it out for everybody, and we will pray for one another. So tonight, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 20. So our story ended last week in 1 Samuel 19 with David in the king's house, married to the king's daughter. The king's son is his best friend, but the king wants him dead out of jealousy for being such a good warrior and so beloved by the people. We talked about that a little bit. That's bound to happen when you have David, who's out amongst the people, gets to know everybody, and then you have Saul, who sort of sets himself up in his ivory tower and never deigns to speak to the people. That's just bound to happen. I think regardless of how you feel politically, I think if you pay attention too much to the political landscape, people respond a lot better to candidates who they feel like are aware of their day-to-day problems, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, rather than people they feel like are sort of separated out away from the issues of whatever they're trying to govern, whether it be a state or whether it be a city or whether it be an entire country. So you see that with David and Saul even in the Bible. Well, this starts to get to Saul, and he starts to really get bothered by it. He wants to eliminate David. That's his solution, is to not become more popular than David, even though that's not necessary. David only ever wanted to be a faithful soldier to the king. But Saul wants to kill David. You would imagine there's several steps you could take before you get to that point, but that's what he decided on. So in 1 Samuel 20, we've seen David's escape out of Saul's sights a couple of times now. The first time, I think he was blaming it on an evil spirit of Saul. The second time, he has to go to Samuel and go to I want to say Ramah. That's not correct. It's an R-A word, and I can't remember. It is Ramah. I was doubting myself, and I shouldn't have. He goes to Ramah, where Samuel's at, and winds up, the Holy Spirit begins to do a work there rather than that evil spirit. But again, it was only temporary, and we talked about all this last week. So we're picking up in chapter 20. Let's go ahead and jump over to our Bible scene. There we go. Everybody can still hear me pretty good. Yes. Okay. So this is where we're going to be at for this evening, is right here. For you guys on Facebook, it's up here. In 1 Samuel 20. And we'll start in verse 1, and this is a really interesting story. So David and Jonathan's friendship is really tested in this chapter. And I think when we break it down, we'll see a really fascinating story. I mean, seriously, this could be, a really good episode of a TV show or a play of some kind. But when we study it as the Bible, I think we really learn some stuff here. It says in verse 1, David fled from Naioth in Ramah. So Ramah where he was hiding out at from King Saul. It says it came and said before Jonathan, so this is their conversation they're having now. David says to Jonathan, "What have I done? What is mine iniquity? What is my sin before thy father, that he seeketh my life?" So, if you ever found yourself in this situation, you perhaps understand how David feels. He's saying to Jonathan here, what did I do? Because you imagine he's racking his brain trying to figure out what he did wrong or what misunderstanding there could have possibly been for Saul to be so angry with him that he tried to kill him. So he's thinking maybe somebody's been talking about it behind his back, telling lies that weren't true. There's no telling why Saul became this way. So he goes to Jonathan and he says, "What did I do? What is happening?" And in verse 20 he said unto me, "God forbid." He said unto him, so Jonathan saying to David, "God forbid, thou shalt not die. Behold, my father will do nothing either great or small, but that he will show it me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so." So in other words, he's trying to calm David down. He's trying to say to him, there's no need to worry, because anything my father tries to do, he's going to tell me about it first. So we'll know about it way ahead of time, and we'll be able to save you from it. So this is Jonathan's way of trying to comfort David. Jonathan assuming that David would also assume that Jonathan is his ally, because they had such an immediate, close-knit friendship. But after having somebody you look up to like King Saul betray you the way that he did to David, David becomes a little hesitant to trust people, because David sware moreover and said, "Thy father certainly knoweth that I have found grace in thine eyes. And he saith, Let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, there is but a step between me and death." He's afraid he's going to die now, which is not something David usually feels. He's usually got bravery and courage to go right onto the battlefield. You look at the way he fought off a lion and a bear when he was a shepherd. You look at his battle with Goliath. You look at all the wars he fought against the Philistines in the name of Saul. Last week we talked about how Saul said he wants as a dowry 100 foreskins of the Philistines, which I don't even want to know what he wanted those for. David goes the extra mile and gets 200 foreskins of the Philistines, which feels like, David, you might need some therapy. Brother, that's the task you don't go the extra mile on. Goodness. But he does anyways. And all of these things that he's done for Saul was out of a place of bravery and courage. So when he's going to defend himself from Saul, it's different. Because all of these guys were uncircumcised Philistines before they were dead. Evidently 200 of them now are circumcised Philistines. But this thing with Saul, number one, it's against the Lord's anointed. God chose Saul to be king, so it feels different. It feels like, David feels like if he steps the wrong way, or if he chooses to fight this battle, that God's not going to be on his side on this one because it's against God's anointed king. And then also, he's had time to think about this. Going into battle is something that you usually don't give yourself a whole lot of time to think about. Stepping up to Goliath was something he didn't take a whole lot of time to think about. Standing up to the lion and the bear wasn't something he had a whole lot of time to think about, but he's had a lot of time to consider what could possibly happen to him. So now he's worried for his life. He says, there is but a step between me and death. He's worried, first of all, that Jonathan won't be brought in on the plan, and that David will sort of circumvent Jonathan because he knows they're such good friends, and he's predicted what they're planning. He's giving Saul a lot of credit here because that's not as clever as Saul is. So Jonathan said unto David, whatsoever thy soul desireth, I will even do it for thee. So basically Jonathan is saying here, okay, David, what's your plan? What do you want to do? And sometimes we say that to somebody sarcastically when they knock down our ideas. We're like, fine, what's your plan? What do you want to do about it then? Which is usually what a husband and a wife do when they're trying to figure out dinner. And they're like, the guy's like, all right, let's go for cheeseburgers. And she's like, we've had cheeseburgers 4 times this week, Dave. Can we please have something different? And he goes, all right, fine, Susan, why don't you pick something? Which isn't what's happening here at all. This is sincere by Jonathan. He's saying, okay, you got a good point there. If that happens, what do you want to do about it? So in verse 5, David said unto Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at meat, but let me go that I may hide myself in the field unto the 3rd day at even. So the new moon isn't necessarily a feast that they're celebrating, because you can read in the book of Isaiah and Jeremiah where God hates the feasts based on new moons because they are not one of the feasts that he gave them. We have a list of in the book of Leviticus. But the new moon represents a new cycle, right? A new season and so forth. So he's saying just when that time of the season comes about, then I'm going to, which is tomorrow, then I'm going to go tell him I'm going to go home for a little bit, but I'll actually be hiding in this field. He says in verse 20, if thy father at all miss me, then say David earnestly asked leave of me that he might run to Bethlehem, his city. For there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. And that is a very good excuse. And once again, can I point out, God's man is using a plan of deceit and lying. And God never mentions being upset about it. I have a lot of people that don't care for my brand of theology, my brand of doctrine, because I say that oftentimes that it is more complicated than just lying is a sin. It's a matter of the heart, right? If you're lying to be deceptive, if you're lying to get away with something that you shouldn't have done, then that is a sin. Yes, but here David is lying to Saul so that Saul won't murder him and his family. We see the story with Rahab. She lies to the guards, and they say, do you know where you're at? And they said, yes, I do. They went that way. If you hurry, you'll catch them. Knowing she just hid them on her roof. Right? So it's more complicated than that. You want a more modern history example of this. If you were hiding in Germany during World War II, or you were hiding a Jewish family in your attic, and you had a certain kind of, shall we say, evil soldier come knocking on your door and asking, do you know where there are any Jews? And you lie to that soldier, have you done an evil or have you done a good? Right? It's not always as simple as all lies are sins. The Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible says lying lips. Lips are an abomination of the Lord. It's the lips that do the lying consistently. Those lips are used to lying. They've been trained to lie. Those lying lips are an abomination unto the Lord. It is not lying that is an abomination unto the Lord. We see another example of that right here. So that's the plan. Deceive the king in order to see what his response is going to be. So in verse 7, David continues with the plan. He says, if he say thus, it is well. Thy servant shall have peace. But if he be very wroth, which David is sure he's going to be, then be sure that evil is determined by him. So I think Jonathan still believes that he can convince his father. Remember the last time Jonathan and Saul had this conversation? Jonathan took his father aside and he said, this guy's a good guy, Dad. He's a good man. He's only ever done good by you. He's a good friend of mine. Please see reason in this. And he was able to persuade his father. And he was able to say, you know what, son? You're right. I shouldn't do this. I changed my mind. Tell him he can come back. And so I feel like Jonathan is still holding out hope for his father, which that's a noble thing. Who would say that that's an evil thing? You know, you're holding out hope that your father will change his mind about murdering somebody? Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan's holding out hope for his dad, but David is saying, Jonathan, you weren't in the room. You weren't there when he cast a javelin at my head. Even the first time, I was like, sure, maybe he can change his mind. But that second time, I had to run to Ramah before I could get him to stop trying to kill me. And so I feel like this little exercise is more for Jonathan than it is for David, because I feel like David kind of knows where the king's heart is. But it says in verse 8, I said computer, there we go. Therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee. So this is the part where David is struggling to trust Jonathan, because Jonathan is kind of going, no, we can trust Dad. And David in his mind is thinking, does he really believe that about his dad, which I could see? Or has his dad convinced him to help him kill me? And this is a trap that they're setting for me. Which any of us, no matter how good a friend they are, we would be amiss to be in David's shoes here and not have a thought of, am I fixing to be duped out of my own life? So he's reminding him of the covenant that they've made and what good friends they are. And he says, notwithstanding, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself. For why shouldest thou bring me to thy father? So that's what we're talking about here. He's saying, if you found some wrong in me and this is some trap you're setting for me, don't wait to bring me to your dad. Just go ahead and kill me yourself, because, I really don't want to drag this thing out. I consider you to be a really good friend. Sorry, Chet. And so Jonathan said, far be it from thee. He says, that's not the case at all, David. He says, for I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon thee. Then would I not tell it thee? He says, if I knew of this evil, why would I lay a trap for you, David? Why wouldn't I tell you? David said to Jonathan, who shall tell me? Or what if thy father answer thee roughly? He says, would you actually tell me? Can I trust you, Jonathan? Can I trust you to tell me the truth? And assume that I can tell you the truth. What if your father, you come out here and ask him like you want to, and he threatens you or he scares you? What's going to stop you from betraying me? Maybe not out of selfishness or malice, but out of fear. You're scared for your own life, and so you betray me just, to stay alive. And that's what he's responding to him here with. And in verse 11, Jonathan said unto David, come and let us go out into the field. And they went out, both of them, into the field. So they've taken some strategy here, which we could all learn from. Let's change atmospheres. Let's change scenery. Right? So you're having a difficult conversation with somebody. Don't walk away angry. I'm a firm believer in that. Don't just walk away angry. The Bible says, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Don't just walk away angry. But what you can do is what they just did here. You can take a step outside. Both of you together. Get some fresh air. Go get an ice cream cone or something. Catch your breath. And in a different scenery, continue the conversation. Because when you change the atmosphere, you change the attitude. All right, so David's getting worked up. Jonathan's upset that David doesn't trust him. Sorry, I keep hitting that. I changed the location of my microphone and I keep banging into it. I express myself with my hands. But David's scared for his life. He's scared that he's going to get betrayed by his friend. Jonathan is upset that David doesn't trust him anymore. Jonathan didn't do anything wrong. He doesn't deserve this distrust either. So you have this back and forth with these two friends. This is the first real challenge of their friendship. And can I tell you something this morning, that it is the challenging moments in life that tell you who your real friends are. Because it's easy for David to be Jonathan's friend. It's easy for Jonathan to be David's friend when everything's going well. But when you have to betray Dad in order to do the right thing, will you? You know, that is not something most people would be willing to do. Believe me, I know. And the fact of the matter remains that David wasn't sure Jonathan would. And Jonathan's upset and David's upset. And so Jonathan says, walk with me out here into this field. Because Jonathan's got an idea. Jonathan said unto David, O Lord God of Israel. Now that is an interesting phrase, isn't it? Let's look at it again. If you weren't paying attention to that, read it again. Verse 12. Jonathan said unto who? Jonathan said unto David, O Lord God of Israel. So that either means one of two things. It either means, number one, that Jonathan is calling David the Lord God of Israel, which I doubt. Or it means, number two, that what he's about to say involves the covenant, the very sacred promise that they made to one another. And he's about to talk about another promise, or that original promise, to God about David. Thank you so much, Janie, I appreciate that. So we see this in our story this evening. We see he's starting to talk to God about David. That's why it's phrased that way. So he says, when I have sounded my father about tomorrow any time or the third day, and behold, if there be good toward David, then I send not unto thee, and showeth thee, the Lord do so much and more to Jonathan. Sort of talking to himself about himself in the third person. Guess that's a royal thing, right? But if it please my father to do evil, then I will show it thee, and send thee away, that thou mayest go in peace. And the Lord be with thee, as he hath been with my father. So that's why he says, as with my father, is because David's afraid Jonathan's loyalties reside at home, and not necessarily with what's right. Which is a tragedy when it's not one and the same. It's a very rare thing, but sometimes parents, without realizing it, ask their kids to choose between what mom or dad asked them to do and what the right thing to do is. It's a rare thing. That never happened to me. That never happened to Amanda, but I did know of some kids whose parents would, hey, go in that convenience store and sneak me out a thing or the other. Or, would get their kids hooked on drugs or worse. It's a tragic thing when a parent asks their kid to choose between doing the right thing and doing what their parents told them to do. So that's the conversation being had here. Jonathan is saying, I will be faithful to you, David, because you're on the side of right. I don't want to hurt my father. I don't want to do anything ill against my father. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. But he goes, but David, I know you don't want to do anything against my father either, but I want to be on the side of right. So he's trying to make this work with his father, give his dad a chance to change his mind about his attitude toward David. He says again in verse 14, he says, and thou shalt not only while I yet live show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not. So in other words, you're going to show me, he's saying, I want you to show me the kind of kindness that we both promised each other, both now and whether or not one of us continues to live. Now that particular part of this covenant between these two men is very, very important, because when David does finally become king someday, he's going to keep this promise to his best friend Jonathan in a really significant way. It's going to cost him a lot politically. It's going to cost him a lot in his kingdom, but he keeps this promise anyways, and it's a truly heartwarming and very touching moment. But we're several chapters away from that. He says, "Also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one from the face of the earth." So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "Let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies." And Jonathan caused David to swear again, because he loved him. For he loved him as his own soul. And then verse 18, Jonathan said to David, "Tomorrow is the new moon." So now we've come to the second part of the story. Now they're hatching a plan. So they've established to this point, verses 1 through 17, is David and Jonathan going, David saying, "Can I trust you?" And Jonathan saying, "Yes, you can trust me." And them establishing this trust. And then in verse 18, once it has been established and David does choose to trust Jonathan again, he says in verse 18, Jonathan said to David, he goes, "Okay, here's the plan. Tomorrow's the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty. And when thou hast stayed 3 days, then thou shalt go down quickly and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when the business was in hand, and shalt remain by the stone of Ezel." So that's just a particular place in the field where he could hide and nobody would be able to see him. And in verse 20, he says, "I will shoot 3 arrows on the side thereof, on the side of the stone Ezel, as though I shot at a mark. And behold, when I send a lad," to be like a young boy whose job it is to go and tend to the equipment of the prince, "I will send a lad, saying, Go find out the arrows. If I expressly say unto the lad, Behold, the arrows are on this side of thee, take them. Then come thou, for there is peace to thee and no hurt, as the Lord liveth." So that'll be the sign. If I say the arrows are on that side, go get them, young lad, then that's your signal to come back to the camp and everything's okay. In verse 22, he says, "But if I say unto the young man, Behold, the arrows are beyond thee, go thy way, for the Lord hath sent thee away. And as touching the matter which thou and I have spoken of, behold, the Lord be between thee and me forever." He says, "If I betray you, may the Lord tend to me as fiercely as I tended to you, and worse." So really trying to convince him, you can trust me, David. Scroll down a little bit. So it says, "So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat him down to eat meat." And the king, so evidently every day they all came together at the same table and ate at the same place at the same time. "And the king sat upon a seat as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty." Evidently David had the same spot every day, a bit like Saul. "Nevertheless Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought, Something hath befallen him, he is not clean, surely he is not clean." Now, let me explain that phrase, "he is not clean," because what that means isn't, oh, he forgot to bathe today and he didn't want to sit next to him because he stinks. That's not what that means. Okay. There are rituals involved with being allowed to eat in what's considered a public sort of venue. So in other words, if he had been unwell in specific ways, he would not have been allowed to eat with other people until a certain amount of days had passed beyond the sickness, so that he was then considered clean by the priests. It's a bit like in the New Testament when you see Jesus heal the leper. The first thing he tells the leper to do is to go present himself to the priests, so that the priests can then consider him or claim him to be clean and safe to be around other people. He had to go to that priest before he could go to anybody else. So that's what he means when he says he's not clean. In other words, he assumes that he's under the weather, he's not feeling well, and he needs to be well before he can be around other people. Verse 27, it said, "It came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty." So this is now 2 days in a row that David has missed the big meal. "And Saul said unto Jonathan his son, Wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to meat neither yesterday nor today?" He's looking for David specifically, and you can imagine why the reason for that is. Jonathan answered Saul, so he's answering his dad, "David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. And he said, Let me go, I pray thee, for our family hath a sacrifice in the city, and my brother, he hath commanded me to be there," which is an older brother, and that was the tradition of that day. "And now if I have found favor in thine eyes, let me get away, I pray thee, and see my brethren. Therefore he cometh not unto the king's table." So that was what Jonathan just told his dad, was that lie. And we've talked about that at length before, so there's no reason to rehash it. But in verse 30, we see Saul's response. It says that Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. Now, don't forget, we're not talking about two soldiers. We're not talking about a member of his cabinet or whatever, someone who helps him lead. Jonathan was all of these things, but we're still talking about a dad and his son. Somebody he watched grow up, had a hand in raising. When it says, "He said unto him, Thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman." I could translate that for you in modern English, but it wouldn't be appropriate. You can use your imagination on that one. "Thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman. Do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion?" And the word confusion there doesn't just mean confusion contextually. It also means like to your own destruction, is the way we would say it today. So in other words, you're helping David to your own destruction and under the confusion of thy mother's nakedness. There's not a real nice way of explaining that phrase except to say there was really no point for your mother to become in that state if the results of that was going to betray me to David in the first anyways. Is that making sense, what I'm saying? Are you confused? Okay. That means other people are confused too. There was no point in Jonathan's mom undressing the night of his conception if the results of that conception were going to grow up to betray him to David. Does that make sense? To get any more specific would be uncomfortable for me. So I'm not going to do it. You can find a dictionary and look things up, I suppose, but I don't know. He's being very vulgar. He's being very hateful and spiteful in this moment. But don't worry, folks. It gets worse. He says, "For as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom." So this is why he's trying to kill David. It's because he sees what's happening. He sees that Samuel has come to him and told him, "The Lord hath removed thee from being king over Israel." And now he sees this kid being set up and beloved by everybody else over him. So he knows that if David continues, then his family and its kingdom will lose the throne forever. So if he can kill David before David takes over, then things will be fine for his family and their future. So that's what he's saying to Jonathan. He's saying the throne will be yours one day. You will be king. And instead you're helping David overthrow your own family. So that's what he's saying here in verse 31. And then at the end of verse 31, he says, "Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die." And so being very plain about calling his son very vile names, and then explaining to him that David needs to die. And then Jonathan answered Saul his father and said unto him, "Wherefore shall he be slain?" In other words, why does he need to die? What hath he done? What did he do that he deserved death? What is his crime? What is his sin? So in verse 33, it says, Saul cast a javelin at him to smite him. Saul, daddy, threw a weapon at his son as though to kill his own son. After having just said, your existence is now useless to me if you're going to help David. I don't think he's winning any Father of the Year awards. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger. Because don't forget, not only was David a better warrior than King Saul, but Jonathan was also a better warrior than King Saul. You might want to go back a few chapters and remember the battle that Saul couldn't figure out how to even get into, that Jonathan and a servant climbed the wall by themselves and won by themselves. So Jonathan's a better warrior than Dad is too. It reminds me a lot. You guys maybe have never seen this show, but it reminds me of an old TV show called Merlin. Was a show made in the UK, and me and Josh used to love watching it. It's not that old a show, but it was so good. And it tells the story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. But King Arthur is still just a kid. And his dad is still in command. And so the relationship between his dad Uther and Prince Arthur in that show reminds me so much of what you see here between Jonathan and Saul. It's an insane thing. So he tries to kill his own son, and Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger, as you would be if anybody tried to kill you, let alone somebody whose job it is to protect and love you. And did eat no meat the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had done him shame. We live in America. Our society does not understand this honor and shame. That's not the kind of society we have. We live in a society that is more success or failure, right? If you pursue something and you succeed, then you're considered to have done well. And if you fail, you're considered to have not done well. Other societies around the world, and even this Israelite society, lived off of what they call an honor-shame society, which meant it mattered less how wealthy or successful you were and more how honorably you lived your life. And so it was a bigger deal, see, because Saul is focused on how successful his kingdom will be, where Jonathan is more concerned with how shameful and not honorable at all his father is behaving. His father's behaving as though he has no honor and is being shameful toward David and toward him. So it came to pass in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David and a little lad with him. This is an extremely emotional moment for Jonathan and David. This is a huge day. Jonathan is heartbroken here. He's beyond angry at his father, and he's beyond grieved that he has to send his best friend away to maybe never see again. He said unto the lad, Run, find out now the arrows which I shoot. And as the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the lad was come to the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried after the lad and said, Is not the arrow beyond thee? And Jonathan cried after the lad, Make speed, haste, stay not. So those words, he's not talking to the lad. He's talking to David. He's saying, you need to leave and you need to do it quickly. I was wrong. Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the lad knew not anything. He didn't understand there was a secret message being sent back and forth. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his artillery unto his lad, and said unto him, Go carry them into the city. And as soon as the lad was gone, you can almost picture this in your mind, right? As soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of a place toward the south, and fell on his face to the ground, and bowed himself 3 times. And they kissed one another, and wept one with another, until David exceeded. This particular phrase, again, along with how close they were and the covenant between them, has been misconstrued by some people who have read the Bible to interpret Jonathan and David's relationship to be more than it actually was. You know what I'm saying? So, again, this is something you have to understand culturally. Culturally, in that place in the world, it is even sometimes to this day not uncommon to greet, like we do here in America with a handshake. They greet one another with a sort of kiss. They're not actually kissing mouth to mouth, but it's like a kiss on the cheek sort of a thing, even between 2 men. It's not considered to be intimate. It's not considered to be as personal as it would be here. It's just a greeting that they have. It's sort of like when you read in the Old Testament about Abraham and his servant, and they go to promise, so they grab each other by the thigh. Right? We don't have that here. That sounds very weird, but it's just the way that it was back then. That's how they made a promise. And that's the same thing here with this kiss. It's not what some people have misunderstood it to be. But they were very, very good friends. Best of friends, very close. And Jonathan said to David, Go in peace. For as much as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. So this story has been a good illustration as to how you can stand for what is right, but do it wisely. I've spent too much of my life burning bridges because I stood for what is right, but I didn't do it with a whole lot of wisdom. And, everything in your life happens for a reason, and the Lord let things come to pass the way that he does for a reason. So I wouldn't go back in time and change anything. But going forward, at this point on in my life, I would like to think that I would conduct myself standing up for the truth first and foremost, but doing so with a little bit of wisdom. He was going to have to be faithful to his father, because his father was still the anointed king of Israel. And so he was going to help his father run the kingdom and take care of its people, but he wasn't going to help his father kill David. He wasn't going to tell his father this, because that would be foolish and get them both killed. So he's standing up for the truth, but he's doing it with a little bit of wisdom. And I would pray this evening that we could take this lesson and we could apply it to ourselves, to say that whether we find ourselves in a difficult situation or not, that we could seek to conduct ourselves to do, first of all, the right thing all the time, but also, secondly, to conduct ourselves to do the right thing in godly wisdom. If you want to know about godly wisdom, go read the book of James. It'll help you out. Seriously. But that is our lesson for this evening. Let's see how I did on time. I did perfect on time. But thank you guys so much for being here. We'll be back on Sunday morning for our Cahoots game, because it's going to be the last Sunday of the month. And it's also going to be trunk or treat. So if you guys are in the area, stop by, and we're going to have people dressed up in their church-appropriate Halloween costumes. We're going to have trunk or treat out here, be passing out candy to the kids. Nobody's going to catch on fire. The Lord's not going to send down fire and brimstone. I'll bet you. I'll just bet you. Maybe some rain, but no fire and brimstone.